Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning on the aging workforce and our strategic approach to managing the aging workforce. It's a really very interesting issue as we're moving forward, especially with COVID. We'll be looking at it from a couple of points of view. One is how do I transition people out of the workforce? How do I start that conversation? But the other part of it as well is how do I retain people in the workforce? Because with COVID, especially if you're in WA, the resources are becoming very, very scarce. So you may not be so willing to let your aging workforce walk out the door at the moment if you don't have replacements for them. So it really is quite a mixed, interesting situation, where you may have people who you do want to transition out because of various costs or safety concerns and what have you. But at the same time, your business may also have to look around at attracting and retaining your aging workforce in purely for the fact that they're not replaceable. While we're in lockdown, we're not getting people from overseas. We're very much in organic growth, and with the booming in the mining sector, and other sectors of industry in WA, resources are becoming quite scarce. So, some questions for you just before we start. Do you know what percentage of your workforce is over 50? And you'd be surprised how many businesses don't look at that number. Do you know what the retirement plans of those people are? And do you have systems in place and processes in place to manage the health and safety of the older workforce? Brand management strategies for that existing workforce, resource planning, knowledge retention, succession planning, things like that. Now, if you don't know the answer to those questions, you're not alone. Don't despair. Many organisations, I guess it's a little harsh to say they have their head in the sand, but it's certainly, for a lot of businesses we've been speaking to, it is not coming up as a priority for them moving forward. And given the current situation with a number of people over 60, the laws around what you can and can't discuss and interact with people, it's making it a kind of a bit of a wicked problem. And then with COVID thrown in, as I was saying before, it's really starting to be quite a complex area, which you do need to start paying attention to. You do need to have a look at what your aging workforce looks like, what their retirement plans are like, or what you're doing to retain them safely moving forward. Because everywhere you turn, there is an opportunity and also a massive opportunity loss as well. So the problem is not going away, and the exceptional challenge to employers is that, and in 2016, the world's advanced economies reached a milestone where the combined working age of population was less than the population over 65, which is putting an enormous amount of stress on our social services. And the biggest issue for, if you speak to anybody that they're in retirement or looking to retirement, is do I have enough money to retire? So, I mean, there are some facts here that we need to consider. Australia's workforce is aging and the growth is slow. So we are not replacing people and moving into retirement. And if you look at 1970, there was 7.5 working age employees for every person over 65. In 2050, there'll be 2.7, that's less than half, working age employees for every person 65 and over. And that's why there is so much going on around the place in terms of social services, pensions, superannuation, all those type of things getting thrown into the mix. Then you look at the average life expectancy, and it's increasing substantially. 1930, 63 years was the average lifespan, so there was no retirement issue there. 1970, it was 71. It doesn't seem that long ago. In 2019, it's 84. And I just saw an article the other day that said that people over 100 is the fastest growing demographic group in Australia at the moment. So people are looking towards long time in retirement. Now, how do you fund that? How much is enough? What are you going to do? It's an interesting problem, but I guess as soon as you get to 60 and above, then you need to take into account the health of people. I know some 70-year-olds that could, would ride me to oblivion in no time at all. They're so fit and healthy, and yet I know other 50-year-olds that can barely walk to the corner store. So that whole health issue starts to become a major issue. And what we find is a lot of people in retirement are using their active retirement, in other words, 65 and onward, to actually try and build a nest egg with a view they're going to live to their 95 or 100. Now, some people, like my mother's husband, he's 98 and quite sprightly and taking advantage of that. But other people, they are convalescing an awful lot sooner than that. So people are moving from an active retirement, they're using that active retirement to continue to work, and then something dramatic happens in their health situation, and now they find that all that money they've been saving for their holidays and that active retirement is now being used to manage their convalescence, and it's probably not what they really had planned for, and it's the what we don't plan for that comes up and bites us. So yes, there are biological effects of aging, and we need to take this into account when we're having this conversation about the aging workforce. There's vision problems, loss of balance, muscular strength, chronic conditions, cognitive decline, things like that. That's all part of it. And I mean, these things are affecting people at different rates at different stages. Some people are in cognitive decline in their 50s, other people are completely active in their 90s. So given that you may not be across this if you have an aging workforce, and some of the businesses we're working with, I mean, the age force of people over 55 is making up 30% of their population. And you may not be able to replace them so easily in our resource-constrained environment. So there may be those you want to retire, but you can't have that conversation with them either. So it really needs to be a joining of HR, the business, retirees, that conversation where we have a much better idea as to where people are at the moment. What are their plans? What are their life stages? What are some of the conditions they're at? And what do they need to either continue their working life in your organization moving forward, or what do they need to be supported into retirement so they can enjoy their retirement? Some people are working all the way through. I mean, there are some famous people that are basically have not stepped off work at a very, very stressful high level right into their 80s. But there are other people that are more than happy to retire at 60 or 55 even. So we need to take into account the biological effects of aging, but they're the things that societally we should be taking into account anyway. So the issues are kind of interesting. For employers, we can't raise the subject of retirement with people anymore. That's off the table. So we need to be engaging with them some way. We don't want to be seen as discriminatory in the workforce, but let's face it, I mean, ageism is a thing, and every organisation would love to employ the 25 to 40-year-old get up and go get up. But as I say, they are not making up the bulk of the population at the moment. Not having looked at the issue in depth, we don't actually understand if we have a problem or we don't have a problem. I mean, we work with a hospital that were actually shocked at the high number of highly skilled people who were looking at retirement in a short amount of time that they had not taken into consideration in terms of succession planning or capacity to develop people back into that role or even find people. It's a minefield of possible industrial strife, so we just stay away with it, it'll take care of itself. We don't know that there's safety issues here, we haven't had a safety issue, or we feel that we've got things adequately covered, but we haven't really investigated it. And even now I'm talking to organisations who have got younger managers that are in their 30s and 40s who are managing a crew of old workers, and they don't know how to have that conversation with them. For the employees, there's a whole range of things. I mean, it's not only the GFC. There are a lot of concerns about the finance, and the government keeps on changing the super. No one knows how to work with Centrelink. What's happening with my super and my investments, and how well is my super fund going? Basically, people are looking ahead thinking, I need to keep working. I need to keep working to maintain a lifestyle. And I mean, the media is very, very happy to start throwing up all these issues about retirees who can't afford to feed themselves and can't afford to find housing and what have you. So we have this view is that if we're caught without money, we're out of the street. People are very keen to know, do I have enough money to retire? But really haven't stopped to have a think about what does my super look like, what are my entitlements, what does the future look like financially for me, nor they've done any budgeting or planning. People realise they could live for another 30 years. They're not ready to retire. A lot of people, their entire social structure is based on work, and they really have no idea or no hobbies outside of that to turn to once they retire. Things are changing so fast locally and globally. What do I do? The whole COVID situation that has hit us, it's just created another issue in terms of the aging workforce. Who can I trust for information? And I lament this. I mean, the world is so complex now. Who do I turn to get? And it's not that people may be giving maliciously giving me false information, and certainly a lot of people can do that because social media allows them to provide malicious information. But even if I wanted practical information, it's so complex, it's difficult to find someone who can actually give me valid, current, and trusting information. I don't actually understand what retirement means, and I need to look after myself. And I guess that's the bottom line. Employees are sitting there saying, what do I need to protect myself from the unknown moving forward? Now, our friend Andrew Kikaros has pulled this together, which is quite interesting, talking about personal pre-retirement products and things that are possibly available for individuals to access, thinking about their retirement. And there's a whole bunch of barriers that people are happy to throw up there. They don't want to admit they have an issue. They really haven't stopped and thought about retirement. I mean, they're kind of rolling forward in our current environment. Everyone's busy. Who has time to stop and think about that? They don't want to spend money. They don't want to admit that to the family, even that they haven't set themselves up well. Some people lost a lot of money over the last 10, 20 years just through what's happening financially around the world. And there's negativity around volunteering. They don't, I guess sometimes their whole persona and who they are is based on the knowledge they have and the value they add to the organisation. From the organisational point of view, there are lots of things that organisations should be doing, but once again, there seems to be in our studies these barriers that the organisation is starting to throw up around to do with the risk and the cost and perceptions and I guess the strategic view of the organisation moving forward. So despite the fact that there are lots of personal pre-retirement products and lots of organisational activities that could be rolling out, there are also equally a number of barriers as to why organisations aren't moving forward on this issue. So what does this lead to? Basically, for an organisation, they're in a stalemate. How do I deal with this massive range of issues that surround me that I don't even know how big the issue is, and I'm just hoping it'll go away, to the employee who really wants to stay in control. I don't want it taken out of me. I don't want to mention anything to HR. I don't want them thinking I'm going to retire in case I'm added to that list and my role's been made redundant. I don't know what I'll do if I leave the job. My life is my work. So it's really led to this stalemate where it seems to be easier to say nothing and hope the problem just solves itself. So some real employee data. These are the things that people are telling us about retirement. Many participants in our workshops are reluctant to talk to HR about their retirement plans. They fear the retirement process is going to be taken out of their control. People feel guilty about holding on to their job to their 70s. It stops a younger person moving into the organisation, but they see the organisation offering them no alternatives whatsoever to solve that problem. So they kind of feel like they're stuck in a framework that's actually been designed by the organisation. Mental and physical health is a major concern for people over 55. And a third of the people we spoke to, they would consider taking a break from work, long service leave, things like that, to try and get a feel for retirement if they had the opportunity to do that. But once again, organisations are kind of locking them into the way they're working at the moment and being quite inflexible about things. And I think that's probably one of we are very much stuck in the 9 to 5, 5 days a week framework, which COVID certainly blew us out of that. I mean, a lot of employees sort of, if people are working from home, they're going to end up with playing with their pets or doing something else, and they won't get the work done, will lose productivity, when in actual fact the opposite has occurred. So having assumptions and then testing those assumptions is important. And I think it's the same in terms of the aging workforce. We're very, very structured and controlled about how we want that to work, your theory X versus your theory Y. And we're reluctant to even test that, to test our assumption that changing the way people work in that close to retirement mode or the aging workforce, trusting that it actually will have a positive impact on the organisation rather than negative. So there are lots of risks to the organisation. There is a risk of talent loss, and that's for people. If you have a cohort that retire over a short period of time, you could lose a lot of excellent talent out of your business. And let's face it, a lot of businesses don't really know when their people are going to retire. There's a lot of knowledge, and there are a lot of knowledges. We hear stories about the little intricacies of systems and processes which individuals haven't included. If there is a process map of running that, I mean, there may be a manual to run a certain bit of machinery, but anyone that works in the field and knows you've got large bits of machinery, there are little nuances to that make it work or can actually close it down. But there is a lot of information that people in the business are holding on to, and in an area where they feel their tenure is at risk, they're more likely to withhold that information and share that information, because withholding that information may give them a sense of power in an organisation where they feel that power could be taken from them. Brand image these days, I mean, if you think you can do something to that is a little shady with your employees, or it's even interpreted that way by the community, it's going to end up on social media somewhere. And if you are in a resource scarce environment, you're trying to attract resources, having a brand that is well known in industry for doing the right thing in managing the workforce right from employment all the way through to exit, in other words, their full employment life, managing that in a very, very positive way is an attractor for people to your business. And the last one there is the work health and safety risk. Now that is a massive one. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because I think the figures will scare you in terms of what that can actually look like. I know if we move forward, it's kind of like insurance. If we move forward, if we don't have an accident, we kind of think, well, was that insurance worth it? But as soon as you do have an accident, it usually ends up costing you a lot more than you think it would. But there is a risk. Workers' compensation, have you stopped and had a look at your workers' compensation claims and attributed the aging workforce to that percentage to see what it's actually costing you moving forward in relation to the age of the people who are working for you? So who wants what? I mean, there are three key groups here, I guess. The one is the employers, and they want a strategy to manage their resources. They want continuity of services. They want a safe work environment, because, I mean, these days that's important as well. If something goes wrong, I mean, I think I heard the other day that for the first time, management has actually been jailed for neglect in terms of safety, which is a huge milestone in terms of responsibility to look after your workforce. And given those factors of our aging workforce, and the fact that you know that that's what's happening with the aging workforce, you just can't turn your back on that and say it'll look after itself. And employers also want to maintain that strong brand image to attract customers, to support the community, and to attract resources, human resources to their business. The employees are simple. They want fairness and equity, they want choices, and they want life stage planning. Now, for the people caught in the middle here, which is the managers and supervisors, they want support, they want information, they want some direction and support around decisions, and they want accountability in terms of managing the aging workforce, because they're kind of blundering, they're caught in the middle of this, and they're not quite sure what they can and can't do either. So once again, from Andrew, having a look at this, I mean, the risk to the organisation and the risk to employees are clear. For the organisation, uncertainty around intentions of their older employees. And for the employees, there's that emotional uncertainty about what retirement is all about. Unknown, unplanned attrition, loss of critical knowledge, reduced productivity are all things that are risks to the organisation. But for the employee, it's how do I find purpose and meaning, connectivity? How do I manage that, my social well-being in retirement? And there's always this fear about the financial impact moving forward. So there are some solutions. I'm not going to go through and read each of those, but certainly the start to this whole solution is paying attention to it, opening that conversation, making it a part of the priority of human resources or the business in terms of putting a strategy together to manage the influx now, as well as the exiting and the retention of the aging workforce. So career life transitions, we run the program Changing Gears, developed by Wayne and Norm in the Eastern States. Many people have gone through the program. So this is the way career life transitions on behalf of Changing Gears approaches that problem of the mature workforce. It starts with that stakeholder buy-in, the analytics, that starts to build a business case. Let's start to talk to employees, actually open that conversation and reconnect that conversation with the business and the aging workforce, business planning, and then tailoring interventions that are specific to the issues that your organisation is facing. And that may be around people risk, it may be around wellness and well-being, knowledge management, transition management. There's a whole range of things there that which will be unique to your organisation. So for the employer, what's in it for me to pay attention to the aging workforce? Well, it really is. If you don't think it's a pivotal, mission critical issue, then it will sneak up on you and it'll hit you like a baseball bat. It is a mission critical issue. It provides that opportunity to focus on the high performance of the organisation because you're managing things moving forward. You're looking at that practical skills, knowledge transfer so that people aren't walking out with critical information about your systems, processes and the organisation that, yes, you may replace it over an amount of time, but how much is it going to cost you to replace it in terms of productivity as opposed to how much would it have cost you if you had simply paid attention and had some transfer program up and going. You're going to retain your good solid performers. People will exit with dignity and respect while valuing their contribution and recognising that you value their contribution, which, as I say, sets you in good stead to attract new human resources to your organisation. You're ensuring that there's a across-the-board fit for workforce, that the framework for the business to move on is in place, and you've looked at flexibility and structuring and what have you, which is much more attractive to people looking to join your organisation than non-flexibility. In terms of the employees, what's in it for them, that ability to retain the status quo as appropriate, access to alternate work arrangements, job shift, ability to add value back via coaching and mentoring, graceful and dignified exit, recognition of the contribution they've made to the organisation, and new options in moving forward, whether within the organisation or outside the organisation, which, as I say, benefits the society as a whole. So paying attention to looking after the ageing workforce has some major benefits for the organisation and has some major benefits for the employees. So these are some interesting stats, as I say, that it may interest you to know. The workers' compensation mental health claims averaged 17 weeks of lost time at a median cost of $27,700,000 for serious claims compared to $10,700 for serious physical injury claims. That's from WorkSafe Australia 2018. In other words, it's nearly 3 times as much payout on mental health claims as there are for physical health claims. Allianz talks about workers' compensation and that there is a concerning trend of secondary mental health issues that's following a physical injury. And these are now starting to build to 4 times more costly than the primary psychological claim and 3 times more of work. So that's 4 times your $27,700 for secondary injuries, mental health claims following physical injuries. So if someone has a physical injury, the secondary mental health claims moving forward are 4 times just the average mental health claims. In other words, we're starting to talk about some seriously big numbers here. To provide some context, now they're talking about that is 8 times more time off work than a primary physical injury. So a secondary mental health injury is 8 times more time off work than a primary physical injury. The last point there is a recent report in the return on investment for employees showed that the right intervention could save Australian businesses $4.5 billion per annum, ROI ranging from $1.30 against each dollar spent for essential job control interventions to $4.70 for psychological conditions and their return to work programs. So that is really saying looking after people with mental health issues and interventions, and given that the aging workforce is moving into that stage where they are probably more likely to fall into that bracket, managing that can add a lot of value back to your organisation and certainly could save Australian business across the board a substantial amount of money. So, when we're focusing on mature age employees, there are a number of options that we may lead to the separation from the company. Voluntary separation, involuntary separation, or a work-related injury claim. Now, if you want people to exit the organisation, voluntary separation is by far the least expensive. But if you start to look at involuntary separation or a work-related injury claim, then the expense to the business starts to increase substantially. So the ideal situation moving forward really is putting in place some a process, a recognition, some kind of focus on the aging workforce, really understanding where they're at, understanding what their retirement plans are, understanding their contribution to the business, and paying some attention to that transition through. So the people who maybe are not fit for work moving forward are happy to voluntarily separate from the organisation. Those that are fit moving forward, that we are setting up some kind of process and support for them to continue working in a safe way, so they never get to that stage where they're moving to a work-related injury claim, especially a mental health injury claim. And at the point agreed by both parties, there is a voluntary separation, so we don't fall into that involuntary separation trap. Now, in doing this, as I say, you may find that at some point you are going to need to re-attract the aging workforce. I mean, as far as I can see, there are, and doing work with City Rotary and involved in that organisation, there are 3 big sources of employment that Australian businesses traditionally have turned their back on. One is refugees and asylum seekers, the other is people with some form of disability, and the third one is the aging workforce, people who have retired, and they may be retired from a quite a physical role, but they're completely capable of moving into a non-physical role. And I think retirees are looking for that opportunity to stay engaged. I mean, maybe at a reduced number of days or reduced workload, but there is still work to be done. And sometimes that just being in there, I mean, just because someone leaves a complex role, going back in and giving them a more simple role by reducing their hours at work is exactly what they're looking for. I knew a fellow who retired from a full-time job. It was quite a physical job in maintenance, and he ended up picking a role delivering cars for one of the car yards. And he loved it, loved cars, loved driving, worked a couple of days a week, and it was a fantastic transition for him. If that car company hadn't looked for an older person to fill that role, how would they solve that problem? Then we're talking about trucks or trying to attract students going through uni and things like that. So there is competition for resources at the moment. So once again, just some key reflections on one of the workshops we ran last year, around this time last year. The key priorities for that group, it's a large organisation, was reduction, flexibility, working hours and working from home. They said, we would love, and we're talking about an organisation that's still employing people well into their 70s and even into their 80s, where they're saying, we would be happy to reduce our working hours and work from home if we had that flexibility with the organisation. They're looking for support in retirement planning and financial education. That is a big one, because the whole super Centrelink, all that kind of stuff is very, very confusing for most people. And given that they're changing constantly, it's very, very difficult to keep up to speed on that. Accessing long service leave or other leave, paid leave entitlements that allows them to start to get a taste of retirement, so they can start to plan their social groups and their social interactions and what have you that they would need to lean on once they go into full retirement. Some other key findings: 90% of the people express they would like to retire prior to the end of 2022, which was a shock to the HR department, because that's quite a substantial cut of the 20 participants that went into that workshop. That the majority of the participants had no real thought or vague ideas of what retirement actually meant in terms of anything other than financial. And even then, their assumptions about their financial ideas were untested and were not valid. That participants would like to be involved in some kind of succession planning to pass on their knowledge. I mean, if you put this effort into an organisation, it's nice to know that you left some kind of legacy that was important to the organisation and recognised by the organisation. And even people who are left there see the organisation recognise these people going through. So they will be very open to mentoring and job sharing as a preferred transition option into retirement. So the recurring themes that we see them: businesses who get on the front foot are much better prepared. Engaging third-party support takes away that fear and concern for both parties, because at this stage, both parties don't trust each other. Being open to different ways of work actually creates great opportunities. It doesn't close down or restrict your business. Involving senior leadership in planning and decision-making is essential, because that starts to flow through. The leaders, they are the leaders of the culture and the values in the organisation. Take the time to speak to and listen to your mature age employees. What are they looking for? Develop systematic models based on supportive analysis, so you're actually building a business case. Integrate approaches with other functions within the organisation. Create your policies and practices catering for the mature age cohort. Looking for an approach through a well-being lens, and so that you are creating a safe environment for them moving forward. And support and encourage the internal champions so that they feel like they have a voice for the aging workforce moving forward. So I'm not going to read this checklist, but it's just a little checklist for you. We'll send this out and you can work through it. But this is a little checklist to, are you ready to start to pay attention and put effort into managing your aging workforce? Because, as I say, for a lot of large organisations, that aging workforce is moving through. The baby boomers are moving through. It's going to get bigger before it gets less. I'm 60. I'm looking at another 10 years of working life, and maybe even beyond that. But looking at the number of people in my situation that are perfectly healthy, perfectly fit, looking for roles, looking for that contribution to the organization and for the community moving forward, we are still a huge group, and we still have a lot of value to add to organizations and the community. So really, in terms of the changing gears, if that's a next step you wanted to take down, a path you'd like to walk down, how would we go about doing that? Well, you need to start that conversation. You need to create a safe environment where you're starting to rebuild that trust. So now we're having a dialogue rather than a mistrustful conversation. We need to provide the baseline for the business. We need to engage the super funds and where they contribute, recognizing that they're only one part of the picture. They're only a third of the bigger picture in terms of what I'm considering moving forward in retirement. And the bigger picture is I need to look at my super, I need to look at the Centrelink and where I fit into that. And I also need to consider socially and my physical and mental well-being moving forward in the society once I move into retirement. It's about gathering valuable data and demographics about retirement intentions, highlighting issues, focusing activity, and starting to explore options for the aging workforce. And once again, they may be options for re-engaging people rather than just retiring them through as we're short on resources. So that brings us to the end of our session. As I say, these are short bursts, really a little bit of a dump on our view of a particular topic. We run a webinar every month. Each one has a different topic. We can expand these out. These are presented in a way to let you know what career transitions can bring to your organization, the services that we can provide. You can have a conversation with us about this. You can expand it into a workshop, a planning workshop, or you can talk to us about implementing some of these initiatives into your organization if that's the direction, the strategic and business direction that you need to be paying attention to and are heading down. I thank everybody who sent in a number of questions. We take the questions that you asked into account as we prepare these presentations. So we've pretty much answered everything that you've put in, but if you have any other questions, please contact us. My name is Peter James. I'm the Director of Career Life Transition. It's been a pleasure spending the last half an hour or so with you. Please give us a call if we can assist you in some way, and good luck in the future moving forward. All the best. Thank you very much.